Hello and welcome to another special edition of the ROKER Report podcast, and we are joined today by former Sunderland manager Alan Durban. Alan, how are you today?
Very well, thank you. I feel under as much pressure as I did the first day I came to Sunderland, having to follow David Jones and Sir Bob Murray.
Fair enough, yeah. There's a lot of pressure on you today, it must be said. But we're also joined by the ITHICS fanzine. Nick, how are you?
Very well, thank you, Connor.
And we've got Neil as well, who's making his debut, I believe.
Indeed, good morning.
He's happy to be here. I think it's your second show, and we brought you in for your age, really.
Yeah, I'm very, very honoured by that.
Yeah, thanks for making me feel a little old.
Yeah, that was
That's all that Alan knew.
Harsh. But before we start, I must admit that this all predates me, really. I was born in 1994, so I'm here today as sort of a guide, a conversation guide, I would describe myself, because obviously I don't know what the feeling was at the time. I've researched it, but you can only get so much from stats and written pieces on the Sunderland.
That 81-82 season was my first full season at Roker Park, and that was Alan's season, I think, wasn't it? But what I remember, no offence, is that we were at the bottom of the league for most of the year, and then all of a sudden we went away at Stoke in March, I think it was, and we had this massive resurgence. We beat Everton at home, and with Nick Buckley goal, and there's a 3-1, I think 3-0 win against Brighton, and Colin West got a couple. There's the emergence of Colin West and Gary Rowell towards the end of that season, and then the next season, 82-83, was a really, really good season because, I thought it was quite a good season. You got Mark Proctor come in and Nick Pickering in, though he was a fullback, but you had him in midfield, didn't you? And you had Leighton James, and it was a really good time, I thought. And then you sort of got the boot in April, which was I thought was very untimely.
Well, it was the first season of the 3 points.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And we went to Ipswich and drew 3-3 in the first game, and you felt you dropped, because we've been in front, you actually felt you dropped 2 points.
Yeah.
And I think we had 11 points at Christmas, and I don't think anybody had survived after that.
But it was that resurgence in the spring, which was a really, we I don't know how many we won, but it was just like, it was a great...
We had a good end of the season, yeah.
Yeah, we beat Man City the last game of the season. It was 1-0.
Yes,
Mick Buckley.
Mick Buckley, yeah.
So really, I want to start sort of from the top. So you'd done well at Stoke City. You came out with a famous quote, which I've written here, which is, "If you want entertainment, go and watch a bunch of clowns."
Yeah. They left the word circus out.
Yeah.
I said go to the circus. You know, that got taken out of context quite a lot. But, my job on an away match is to hope that your supporters would go home quite satisfied. And the best way of getting points, certainly we didn't have a lot of goal scorers, the best, was to organise us defensively. And we were getting round to that at the point that I left.
When you'd moved, what was behind the move to Sunderland at the time?
Well, I'll tell you a story. In 1953, which is going back an awful long time, Sunderland went down to play Swansea City, or Swansea Town as it was then, in the third round of the FA Cup, I think. And in Wales, it doesn't snow that much in South Wales, especially as the Vetch Field then was right near the ground. And there were 2 inches of snow on it. It was, all the markings were in blue, and I can remember it as if it was yesterday. And at 20-5, when every football match finished in those days, you ran to the station to catch the bus. To catch the train. And as I was running, the Sunderland team overtook me. And they actually were on the train that went through Port Talbot where I lived, and were on their way, I assume. They were going up to London to then catch the... And they were there, and I got the autographs of Trevor Ford and Ray Daniel, who were Welsh internationals. Mm-hmm. And that was my first connection, really, with Sunderland Football Club.
And how did did Tom Cowie contact you for the job? I mean, how did that come about?
I think the secretary contacted me and said, would I be interested in coming out? We'd come up, and I think we'd played very well in a League Cup here. I remember Mike Doyle and Sammy Irving getting a couple of goals here, and we'd played quite well. And I got a phone call. I assume it might have been from, it was more likely it would have been from a pressman, to say, would I be interested? But I was just about to leave for Barbados with the Stoke City side. We'd been sponsored, I think, by Red Stripe Lager or something like that. And so we were out in Barbados. And I wasn't going to miss that that trip. Thank you very much. And they promised me that if we'd stayed up or if we'd finished it, I had some agreement with them that they said my family could go to Barbados and catch us up a week later or something like that. And so I'd had 2 really good weeks in Barbados and came back, and then I handed my notice in officially, although I had made my mind up, before I went. Also, one of the reasons as well was I played football with a chap called Ivor Allchurch, who was probably one of Wales's best players. And he came back to Cardiff, having gone from Swansea town to Newcastle. He came back to Cardiff and played with me my last 2 years there. And he said, if you ever get a chance to go and work in the Northeast or play in the Northeast, grab it with both hands. And that stuck with me, really, because, I'm a sports nut. I haven't just been interested in football. I've played sport. I've played golf or tennis every day this week.
Did the Northeast live up to its billing? Are you happy that you did make the move up here?
I did. Oh, it was a great experience. I loved every minute of it. Absolutely loved every minute. But I was fighting people all the time. That was the problem.
So, I remember when you came up, you're actually the first manager I remember arriving at Sunderland. I must have been about 12, 13 years old.
Yes.
And I remember it was a big surprise at the time because you'd done pretty well with Stoke. They were nicely settled mid-table. And then he came to us and we'd only just avoided relegation.
Yep.
So, what sort of promises did Tom Cowie make to you about the sort of transfer budgets or anything like that?
He didn't have them, but I just came up on my own. Do you know what I mean? I never brought a whole bunch of physiotherapists and coaches and assistant managers. I just came up on my own and drove up. He never really promised me anything. He increased my wages slightly, and Stoke had offered to equal that anyway, so that wasn't the reason. The thing that Ivor Allchurch said to me, come up and up the Northeast, you'll love it. And that stuck with me. And, that was probably 6 years, 7 years later before I, eventually came up here. But that as a manager, you never went into those things. It was either you wanted to go, and I just saw the potential, as I thought, at the time. But
did Tom Cowie give you any money? I remember the first programme cover of that season was against West Ham, I think it was. There was a picture of you and Ali McCoist. You just signed Ali McCoist for big money from St Johnstone. I believe.
But I'd given them permission to sell Joe Bolton to Middlesbrough. So we used that was nearly all that money, really. So that was no, he didn't say anything. I just thought potentially it was a huge club.
Sunderland had narrowly avoided relegation the previous season. So what was the state of the club like when you joined? In terms of infrastructure, in terms of players, was this a team that was destined to get relegated to the second division?
Yeah, I would have thought so. I went on tour to Scotland pre-season, and I think I took 24 players, and I still had 3 players in America. Now, that didn't amuse me, the thought that, to save money on summer wages, that you'd let your players go to, because during my period at Derby, I got asked to take the Welsh team as captain to New Zealand. And Clough told me and congratulated me and then said, but you ain't going. And, that was typical. You need to recharge your batteries during the summer period. And I came back here, and as I say, so my brief really was not promising to sell. My brief was really to sell 8 to 10 players and cut the staff down.
So it was very much sell to buy.
Yes, hopefully. But, at that particular stage, the money was negligible. I was fortunate to do in that first pre-season to be able to go and buy Ali McCoist. But he had never done an apprenticeship in football. I think he was working in a tax office in Perth, and was playing part-time at St Johnstone. Yeah, and I went up, I think, 3 times to have a look, see what I thought. And he was very much like Kevin Phillips when I went to see him. He couldn't hit the barn door, but he could play.
I remember McCoist's debut.
Yeah.
And I remember very vividly standing in the Fulwell end, and the bloke next to me said, "By that lad's too good for us." because he just seemed head and shoulders above everyone, and just that 3 yards ahead of everyone in his thinking.
Yes.
So it's,
When you go and look at a striker, you never want to see him start to move.
yeah.
By the time your eyes are on him, he's really got to be on the move and away. And Ali was terrific. He played against Rangers that night. He had about 5 chances. He missed every one of them. They lost about 5-1, and I came back in the car with the doc, and we said, how much he's got to come. But he was nowhere near ready when. Although he did play I think he came on as sub at Ipswich in the first game, if I remember rightly.
He was very raw when he was with us, wasn't he?
Yeah, well, he hadn't done his apprenticeship. He didn't know what the habits of professional footballers. I couldn't find him at night. He was extremely popular, Ali, when he was in Sunderland, and still is.
What happened with the senior pros like Kevin Arnott and Joe Bolton when you first arrived?
Joe Bolton had gone before he went the day I think he went January, but they'd spoken to me about him, and I said, I think they were offered 200,000, I think, from Middlesbrough. So I said, snatch their hands off, because I thought it might give me a bit of strength to get my type of player in. And Arnott had loads and loads of ability, but could never rely on him. And it doesn't matter where you work in, whether it's in a football stadium or you're working in an office. You want to know what people are going to give you. And Clough used to split all our players up as labourers and artists. And he said, once it gets January or February, you don't want too many artists up that northeast. And as a result, you really want people who you know what you're going to get from. And I mean, it took me, I think I wheedled the whole team out, in about a year and a half. Which went from Siddle to Whitworth to Allardyce, Sam Allardyce, Dunn, Ritchie, Hawley. I mean, I could go through. I wrote them down the other night. There were about 16 that went in about 2 years.
But Sean Elliott formed quite a big part of your defence, didn't he?
Sean kept getting injured, and I was never really sure what his best position was. He was a bit similar to Colin Todd, who I'd played with, in that Sean never read it particularly quickly, early. Never read the situation early, but had terrific pace, and his pace got him out of trouble. Not the best passer of the ball, but he was in the side when I left, and he was part and parcel of the side, and I think he was maturing into a bit of a left back at that particular stage, and he was useful.
Chris Turner had done well the season before. So what was your thinking about the goalkeeper position?
Well, I just thought he was a good keeper. I thought Chris Turner was a good keeper, and he went on to win the first Premiership with Man United.
Yeah.
I think. And he was a really good keeper, Chris Turner. Barry Siddle always wanted to play, and I think he was happy to get back to Lancashire, I think, where he went. And, of course, I had the kid, Prideaux, who was starting as a young lad and doing well in the youth side. I was quite happy with those two keepers, really.
We talked a little bit about Ali McCoist before, but I wanted to see what your thoughts were on how well he did after he'd left Sunderland. Were you frustrated that Sunderland didn't get to enjoy Ali at his best?
Not really. No, I was pleased for the lad. I mean, I've seen him a couple of times since, but I mean, the lad always had potential. The lad could always find space, and the lad always had 2 really good feet. Tried too hard in his early days, and never done an apprenticeship. Didn't know how to live as a professional footballer. And you acquire all those things while you're growing up. Now they're going into academies at 8 and 9 year old. Now he's starting his real professional career at 17 and a half. And suddenly he's playing in a side that doesn't create many chances. And to be fair, he never really had what I would call a great opportunity at Sunderland, because we were never on top in enough matches during that period. But likeable lad, he was absolutely terrific.
And was it a good decision to sell him in 1983, or was it a decision made out of necessity?
I approved of the decision because he didn't really get enough goals to make an impact on our position in the league.
Had Gary Rowell as well.
I did have Gary Rowell, and I was never sure about where Gary wanted to play, whether he wanted to play right up as the front man, or play off at number 10, or even play in midfield, which I did once or twice. But he was a natural goal scorer. He knew where the ball was going to drop in the box, and he was in the side as when I left and doing quite well.
You'd offered youth a route to the first team, so the likes of Pickering, Venison, West, Prudder, and there was similar like Bracewell at Stoke as well. So was that something you favoured as a manager, like bringing in the youth players?
I did. Well, I think it's all about development. I'd left Adrian Heath and Steve Bold at Sunderland at Stoke, and when they were only just young lads, I'd brought Bracewell into the side, I'd brought Chapman into the side, and I was very sad to leave them because it's they're only embroyos or whatever you call it. They're starting off, and you like to see how they're growing up. I suppose a bit like your own children, because you have to give them so much advice at times. You actually feel like their fathers at times. And then I came here and saw one or two. Like Venison was always going to be a player, and Pickering had a very good early part of his career. Didn't do so well towards the end. But, there were enough young lads all the time. And the one thing about signing young lads, because I wasn't that old myself, I was fairly close age-wise, is that, they will listen to you, generally. They can relate to you better, I think.
How would you define your style of play and your style of management? Because Gary Rowell said, I was reading before in an article, that you were always after a clean sheet. Is that the sort of manager you were, or was that necessity because of the resources you had?
No, I think there was a necessity from the resources. I think that we could never dominate games long enough, because while I was trying to build a team, I was always having to actually get rid of people as well, and I had a lot of obstacles. They cut the Roker. Did they knock the Roker Park down during that era? There was the miners' strike. Everything was going on, and during that time, the only bit of good news I think was that we won that big test with both of them, the Ashes test. And those were the same.
I remember that second season you were there. I remember some quite free-flowing attacking football. You had Leighton James on one wing, and you had your midfield. You had Bracewell and Proctor. You brought in. That was quite a solid midfield, and with Leighton James on the left. Yeah,
that was probably more the third season, I think, more so than the second. Although we stayed up, I think, with about a couple of games to win to go in the second season. I don't think I was that defensively minded, but I had worked with Clough, and Clough's big thing was keep a clean sheet. You'll always get a couple of chances to score, and we didn't have enough attacking players. I was always introducing people like Gordon, like West, and young lads, and Cummins was a huge disappointment for somebody who potentially was a really good player.
How much did you model yourself on Brian Clough?
I liked the way, if somebody asked me about Clough, he was so unpredictable, and you couldn't second guess him, and if you thought you were a regular in the team, and he stuck the team sheet on the wall. If he didn't jump up and have a look at it and thought you were okay, you could cross your name out. And some of the things that he did, his discipline was good. I mean, we didn't get many people sent off. We didn't get people booked for dissent. We generally had a fairly good record with that. And in the position we were in, we couldn't have afforded it anyway. But I learned a lot from him.
Did you ever pick up the phone to call him when you were manager at Sunderland for advice?
No, not really. No. I made my own mind up. I didn't want to be a second Brian Clough. I made my own mind up what I wanted to be.
How did you get your ideas across during your first season here? How difficult was it to put your stamp on the team?
I always felt I was fighting things. The people running the club weren't, and Tom Cowie was chairman, and he didn't like me because my car was always dirty to start with. That never helped. But him and I think he brought his own accountant in, Jeff Davidson, to be secretary of the club, and they weren't football people. 2 years before, we should have played Stoke in an FA Cup. Sorry, I was manager of Stoke. We should have played Sunderland FA Cup. No, it wasn't a cup. It was a league match in December or January. And they never got to Stoke because they'd gone and parked the bus and the team had stayed overnight in a high altitude hotel, so in Sheffield. Now either Newcastle or Middlesbrough had gone all the way to Bristol. You know, in winter, why would you stop in Sheffield? And we had to call the game off. Like our half-hour supporters were almost in the ground, and that's when I realised that the club, I don't think, had enough football people in and around the club who were brought up with football habits.
Do you look at that, like the problems that Sunderland have had recently? Do you think that was the same? You know, not enough football people, and that's why they fell into third division, and that's basically what happened after you'd left as well.
Well, I think at the turn of the century, I think Sunderland won the league 5 times. Is that right? So that would tell you there's enough local people around that would contribute to your side, and your side be good enough. But what I found during that year was there was always an obstacle somewhere. You try and you think everything's all right, and then something would happen. Now, this was a major issue, the 3 players going to America, because I think Stan came back injured. I don't know, there was Sean Elliott and Barry Siddle were there. And all of a sudden, for the first 3 or 4 weeks I'm there, I haven't got 3 of the players, to work with.
The reason they did that is because they saved wages in the summer.
Well, they saved wages for the summer. Everything was cost-cutting. Everything. And then they pulled the Roker end down, didn't they? During one of those seasons I was there. So we played with some tin sheeting at the back of the goal, I think.
During your first season, we went on a brilliant run towards the end of the season. We won 6, drew 3 and lost 2.
Yeah.
We stayed up on the final day when we won at Man City.
At home
to Man City, sorry. I have put against there. My own error. What was what changed that year? How did you manage to
I brought
turn
West
the
in. I
fortunes?
brought Colin West in. Is that right? The first year I think I brought Colin West in, and it gave us a bit of size. We played off the centre half, and to be fair, Westy came to me and said to me, "Hey," he said, "I should be in this team, or I think I can do better than the people that are in the team." And I was slipping McCoist in and out, and I was messing about a little bit more than perhaps I should have. And suddenly we suddenly we'd always had a bit of confidence. I never felt that we were going to go anywhere and get a belt in because we could defend. And then we had a good run, and I worked a whole week on before that. I said, we're not going away anywhere. None of you are talking to the press. What we're going to work on is actually shooting. And we worked nearly all week on shooting and keeping low as you hit the ball. So you made sure that nothing was getting ballooned over the bar. And it's amazing. One dropped to Buckley after about 25 minutes, and he hit it. And we stayed up. And I mean, if ever I did achieve anything as a football manager, that first year was probably the best that I ever did.
I can see that Mickey Buckley goal in my mind now as it was the full end, and everyone I got crushed in the foot when that run, and it was just a brilliant goal.
Yeah.
Did that run, if I'm right in saying, did that start at Stoke away? Have you got the figures in front of you?
We lost against Borough on April 3rd,
That's
then we
right.
drew at home to Ipswich.
And we went away at Stoke, I think.
How good was it to beat Man City on the final day to secure the position? What was your day like? How did you celebrate?
Oh, yes, there's too much relief to celebrate. It was just I was so pleased in the day it justified in the decision I made in coming here, and also to see our gates had dropped dramatically during that period because people had got fed up. We hadn't won many home games, and I don't do celebration very much. I was just satisfied that the job had been done and the players had done it. It's if your players are responding to you, that's the best thing that you can do. And on that particular day and on that particular run from that Stoke match, it was a pleasure to be manager of Sunderland Football Club.
I think as a fan, we were on a crest of a wave as well because there's 3 final home fixtures. I think it was Everton, we won 3-1 at home. Then Brighton, we beat 3-0. And that was just and then the last game was Man City, and it was like a crest, and the fans just were all up for it. I think that last game was 26,000 or something. It was quite a lot of people there.
It was pretty full in there. I remember being there.
Yeah.
It
was euphoric.
It was a great day. But we also had a good result against Forest in that run, did we?
Can't
Didn't we
remember.
get a draw with them about 2-2 or
Might have
something?
done, yeah.
Second season, you saw more experience through the door. Jimmy Nicholl, Frank Worthington, Leighton James. Was that a change in policy given the results in your first season, or was it resources able to let you do it?
Well, Leighton James and Frank Worthington added to our attacking force. You know, they had brought different. Leighton James could cross the ball exceptionally well, and then Frank. And Frank was a terrific pro. That's what surprised me, because Clough had 1 or 2 instances with him where he was dressed like a little bit like Elvis Presley and things, Frank. But frankly, I got to know Frank very well, even afterwards. And he was a great influence on the kids. And I hadn't seen that at the club. It's very, very handy to have somebody really strong at the club. So if anybody's anybody bullying the kids or bullying the apprentices, you jump on them straight away. And Frank was like that and was a really good influence in the club, and did all right for me until he got an injury after about 3 months.
What did you make of the second season? Because we fought relegation again. Were you expecting to be in a relegation fight, or did you think you had more in the squad?
Yeah, we never, as a side, had enough goals in us. As good a player as Paul Bracewell was an excellent player. He was only get 2 or 3 a year. I couldn't really add up. I never had a 20-goal-a-year man anyway, and that is why I assume that people thought I was fairly negative in my thinking. But I felt at times I had tried to sign attacking players and look for attacking players, but we were always short of goals because we couldn't control matches for long enough.
And were you ever tempted to move? There was reported interest from Leeds and Manchester City at the time, but did you ever think about leaving Roker Park, or were you committed to the job here?
No, Leeds asked for permission to speak to me, and it was refused. So for that little period, somebody liked me somewhere.
How does that make you feel, though, when you don't get the opportunity?
Well, I
to
mean,
speak
that was huge. It was a huge job, the Leeds job then. I mean, it was probably post-Revy. I don't think I ever thought of it. I was enjoying working here. I was enjoying bringing kids through. Because I was still playing. I was still playing the reserves occasionally, because there's nothing like playing. Once you've finished it, it's whatever you do. It's never the same as actually playing. I went and played in the reserves and enjoyed playing at the back, and I helped to bring the kids on, or hoped that I helped to bring the kids on, and hope they would learn a little bit about talking on the field, about positions, holding positions, marking people, and just reminding people what their job should be. And that's what I think. The one thing I think when players went on to play for me, when they went on the pitch, they knew what their jobs were.
How did you feel managing Sunderland legends like Gary Rowell, Sean Elliott, Paul Bracewell? How does it feel looking back that you were, critical in their developments and sort of their stories as Sunderland players?
Well, Gary was ready-made when I got here. Sean had terrific ability. Wasn't sure what his best position was. He'd played next to centre-half most of his career. But, I mean, I fetched Paul Bracewell with me from Stoke. So I knew all about him. He'd been turned down by about 3 clubs, even as a kid. And I took him, and I just liked his attitude. And, he was a very strong influence, and as he was when he came and worked with Reid afterwards. And his contribution, I think, to the club has been immense, considering he spent a couple of seasons at Newcastle as well.
What went on with the Stan Cummins free transfer? He went to Crystal Palace, I believe, and then he came back a year later.
Stan was away in America and got injured out there, and I contacted him and said, well, come back early if you... Oh, no, we're having a good time out there. And when he came back, he then had to renew his contract, and the secretary forgot to put in either the bonus sheet or something like that, but had made a mistake. Now, we're talking about somebody who wasn't a football man. This is what I'm trying to say to you. He forgot to put the bonus sheet in, and that meant that you were offering somebody a lower contract than you had before, which entitled him to get a free transfer. So he went to the PFA and applied for a free transfer. And I was never very keen on anybody that didn't want to play for the club. I mean, all I'm interested in is people who's going to give everything for the club. And he was never interested in that. He was a really good player, Stan Cummins. He had terrific ability, but he was a worrier. First mistake he'd make, he'd worry about it. And he worried about other things that, it would never cross my mind to worry about.
How good did you think Pickering and Venison could be? They both went on to play for England.
Pickering was a free, whatever you would call it. He could play. He loved running. And I started with him at fullback, and I took him to Scotland my very first season, really, to carry the kit around and to help out. And I threw him into one of the games and said to him, look, every time you space in front of you, just get forward and run with it. And he had a magnificent. He won the Young Player of the Year, I think, the North East Player of the Year, Young North East Player of the Year the first year, and did exceptionally well. I thought he was good. And then, but of course, he left fairly soon after I did. Didn't have as good second and third years, but still kept his place in the side and was a threat down that left-hand flank.
I remember him being definitely a runner, a little bit like a winger.
Yes, yeah. He crossed a few balls that we got goals from in that period, and
he scored a few as well, didn't he?
Yeah, good lad, nice lad.
Looking towards the end of your time, you'd built up quite a team, but was it a shock to be sacked when you were sacked?
No, I'd fallen out with him, with Tom Cowie. Tom Cowie's idea of... Tom Cowie used to ring Bobby Robson, and he'd ring other managers, and he'd come in and try and tell me things about football, but you couldn't have a discussion on football. When I was at Shrewsbury, I'd managed Shrewsbury and I'd managed Stoke. The chairman, the secretary, and myself, to a lesser degree, ran the club, and I knew what was happening. When I came here, I had no idea what was going on within the club, and within 2 or 3 weeks of the season tickets coming available for the first season, I got a knock on the office door, and my secretary said, there's a gentleman and an old lady wants to see you. So they came in, and the lady's in tears. So I said, what's the problem? She said, we've just been to renew our season tickets, and somebody shouted from the commercial office, you're wasting your money, they'll be down by Christmas. And that's what I was fighting against. All the time I was there. There were always, the press, for instance. I used to drive up from Yarm every day, and I had 5 sort of national newspapers who all then had their individual area up here that I had to get stories to the northeast. I had to fill their papers with something about Sunderland. And then you had Paul Etherington locally and John Richardson as well, who were the local reporters, and you were having to fill papers when I'm driving up, I'm trying to make things up in my mind, just to keep Sunderland getting enough publicity. So it was those sort of things that I was fighting all the time on my own, and I didn't really have the coaches I had. I had Mick Doherty the first year, who was very close to players. Proper football man. Mick was very enthusiastic, worked hard, reliable, but was too close to players because he'd played with them and been injured and taken over as coach. Then I had Peter Eustace the following year, and then the best chance I had was when I paid a little bit of money for Pop Robson to come back from Chelsea, and he looked after the side the third year, and that's when I thought we started to have a real chance.
You spoke quite a bit about Tom Cowie. What was your relationship like with him? Obviously negative, but sort of away from football, did you get along, or? No. Well,
I didn't see him away from football, really. I might have gone up there for dinner once or twice when something wasn't right. I never had any trouble with him in terms of board meetings or reprimanded, and He once gave me a row for getting 4 points playing in the reserves for getting booked or something like that. But his knowledge of football and what was required, he was always wanting to save money. And he was always whinging that when a player's car came back, it did look as if some chickens had been living in it or something. But he was, he's a good businessman. But I don't think he knew what the public wanted. Let's put it that way. That was probably my best analysis of him, because he could say the wrong thing. He was always saying that we need to cut corners and we need to be, cut the wages. Everybody else is growing in the country because football was, expanding again. And I felt we were very tied.
I was just going to say, Tom Cowie was always a very divisive figure up here. Undoubtedly loves Sunderland.
Yes.
And his widow now is still involved with the Beacon of Light and all that side of thing. But it very much, divides opinion up here.
Yes.
And it's just really, when that decision came, it was a split board decision?
Well, it was very intriguing, because he'd appointed Barry Beatty, who'd been one of his major vocal enemies in the press and at AGMs. He'd appointed Barry Beatty to the board, probably 3 months, perhaps 4 months before I finished. And to my mind, it's quite possible he put him on the board to even the votes up on my dismissal, so that left him with the casting vote. Yeah. So that was, it was a very strange one, because my main ally on the board was a chap called Ian Fraser, who was a sportsman. He'd come up from Suffolk. He was a farmer and lived up at Berwick-on-Tweed and was a terrific bloke. He was reliable. He'd been a county tennis player, and he was a single-handed golfer, and he was a sportsman. And he mixed with sports people all the times. And so he could relate to me and how things were going. And of course, when I did get the sack, he resigned at the same time, at the stupidity of what he saw as a stupidity.
I think Neil said it right. He was very divisive here. No one really liked him. You made that comment about how Newcastle got better attendance than we did.
That's right.
Against the Swansea, it was like, that was just like really stirred the pot.
I never forgave him for that. No, you're right.
How disappointing was it to see your Sunderland team that you'd built for the long term broken up after you'd left? So, Bracewell, Chapman, Pickering, Venison, they all left within a few years. Was it frustrating watching your good work kind of get destroyed?
Well, obviously, I was extremely disappointed to get sacked, but I had a feeling it was coming. Now, you can tell when you're not the chairman's best friend. And the Barry Beatty thing, I felt right from the very start, why has he got one of his biggest, enemies onto the board? But what did I do? I stayed out of football for about 2 months. I went and played for Willington. And I went up there and managed them for a little while and played as well and got back to loving life. And I never harboured any grudges about this at all. I might have made my own mistake, because I was offered a contract and I didn't snatch their hands off. I was offered a yearly extension, same wages, no bonuses or nothing to improve the contract. And I just thought it was a token effort by Mr. Cowie, and at the end of the day, he's entitled to do what he wants. If he wants to put his money in and run the club, he's entitled to say, I've had enough of you. But what really hurt, was who I was replaced by, somebody who just got the sack by Newport County, and the fact that within 3 seasons you dropped 2 divisions. And Laurie came in after him, and he couldn't win a match. They got relegated in no time from the Championship, or from what was the old second division. So that's what hurt, because I liked the club. I have no feeling I loved the club. I loved working up here. I loved the fact that I went down to watch some cricket down at one of the colliery grounds, and the 2 West Indian opening batsmen are playing for them. And then I'm walking about, and then somebody comes in the office, and it's Brendan Foster and and his mate, the runner, that Steve Graham, that, I think they were helping out with Nike then or something like that. But when you come to a sporting area like this, you realise, I'm from Shropshire, and other than Shrewsbury Town, there's hardly anything that goes on there regarding sport.
I wanted to, number one, you've obviously got a book coming out. I thought it would be good to hear sort of what the book, well, I presume it covers your full time at Sunderland. Does it cover your whole life, start to finish?
No, the book's extremely strange. I mean, David Snowden has rung me a couple of times and said, look, I'd like to write a book about 81 to 84 while you were here. There's nothing in it about my personal life at all. It is just about the football club over the 3 years. And my contribution has been minimal, but the book is accurate, and it's. I come out of the book reasonably well. I mean, obviously I made mistakes while I was here, and he reminded me of them. And but the overall thing, I think, represents the Northeast. By the title is that people have got no patience. But they're changing managers left, right, and centre. They think the manager's always the problem, and the big problem is that we let people, players and kids from the north, because we're not what I call successful clubs. And you think, and none of us have won the league. Us Middlesbrough, the top division for years and years. The players are too happy to move from here, or the kids are too happy to move from here. Brian Robson and Kendall and people like that, they should never have left the Northeast. They should be playing their football in the Northeast. Mm. And that's why I think that, the whole demise of the area in terms of not winning things is caused by allowing too many scouts in to pinch people from Wallsend boys clubs and places like that. I mean, Shearer went down to Southampton to start, didn't he?
Yeah, Michael Carrick as well.
Yeah.
He's a local lad who, well, there's countless players, isn't there, that we've missed out on.
So the book really is only about, it's a hard read if you're not a Sunderland supporter. Yeah. And I never thought David would get a publisher. But he's got a publisher, and the book is it's interesting for me because there's things in there that I'd forgotten. Yeah. About incidents on matches and incidents on people I'd bid for. And it was really, really good.
I've got two final things I want to ask you about. So number one, I want you to tell me your favourite Brian Clough story from your time with him.
There's a few stories I can't tell you. We'd gone to a place called Lee Green training, and for 3 days before a big match. And it's out in the country, you get bored stiff there. I'd had a game of tennis with him just to amuse him because he won, but two of the lads had sneaked in, gone out for a walk and gone into the pub. But they'd only drunk soft drinks, so I'm told. So anyway, he sends them home. This is about 30 or 40 miles home. So we're all playing there now, and there's been a bit of a barney, because we've said to him, hey, they're only drinking cider, and Cloughy wouldn't listen to anything you said. Anyway, so we're playing cards, and it's all very, very quiet, and the atmosphere is horrible. And Les Green, who was a bit of a comedian, came in with a white coat on, and on top of his shoulders he had a case of beer. So he came in, I don't know if you remember the advert where he came in, he knocked the door and he shouted, Davenport's beer at home for Mr. Clough. And all of a sudden, Cloughy got up and chased him out of this door. He'd taken the mick, calling him Mr. Clough as well. I mean, it was hilarious. But what it did, it just broke the ice again, so everybody was relaxed again. But he shot up and chased him out that door.
And you also worked for the club Sunderland later on in your life. And what was your role for people who didn't know?
Well, I went there as Paul Bracewell rang me. I'd worked for Paul when he was at Fulham as manager, and he rang me and he said, Reid's looking for a chief scout. So I wasn't doing anything. I'd finished at Stoke as assistant manager, I think. Oh, no, I hadn't. That was before. I'd gone there, and I went anyway, and we did all right. I think we might have won promotion fairly fortunately. It's really his second year, was it?
Well,
He's kept them up, didn't he? And then he won promotion, and then went down. And then he said, look, we've got to get some better players. So he said, I'm thinking of Niall Quinn. So I went over looking at him at West Ham, and Quinny got 2, and I said to Reedy, well, he would, he'd score now without any problem. And I'd watched Kevin Phillips for about 4 or 5 times, and Watford's a horrible place to go to if you're scouting, and nowhere near the ground to park. They promise you a car park ticket, you get there and there's no one there, and it's a bind. And I never enjoyed going, but I went, and somebody had told me he'd come in from non-league, and because he started as a kid at Southampton, they released him, and he came in and he Baldock Town, I think he was. He played as a. And I went to see him, and he kept getting in position. He was very similar to McCoist, but a bit quicker, bit quicker. And he missed chance after chance after chance. And then I went to a dinner, a league manager's dinner, and I was fortunate enough to sit next to Glenn Roeder, who had just got the sack at Watford. I said, tell me about Kevin Phillips. And he said, he's just come back from America, and we think they've taken a bit of a bursa or a growth off his ankle. So I said, oh yeah. I said, how's he going now? He said he was flying. So I went back to Reedy. I said, Reedy, I'd already marked down and sent reports in to say he would do us. So when Kevin came up, he had Ipswich offered the same money, I think. And Kevin came up, and I sat with Reedy and I, and we really sold him on the strength of playing with Quinn. That the thought of playing off a big man. And I mean, they were sensational. I mean, he was absolutely terrific. So he did win the Golden Boot, didn't he?
Yes.
Kevin, yeah.
Yeah, European Golden Boot. One of the few.
And McCoist did as well. Unfortunately, he was at Rangers at the time.
And when did you leave Sunderland? At the end?
I got the opportunity to go to Stoke as assistant manager.
You were caretaker there as well, weren't you, as well?
That was after somebody got the sack. Go on. There was a lad that's on Sky Sports in Sunday mornings.
Kamara,
yes. Kamara was there at a bad time because his dad died, I think, soon after he took over the job, and he had a sticky spell there. And then I went down and I did the last 6 matches, I think. And one of the matches was actually here, which we lost. But I enjoyed it. And then I up until 2 years ago, I worked in the academy at Stoke as a mentor with the young players, with midfield players mainly. Because I can't understand why midfield players have stopped scoring.
They're all sitting.
When are we going to get the next Lampard and the next Gerrard? And it's because of the sitting-in midfield player. It's the worst thing that's ever happened to football. Because the centre-halves can't pass it now, the midfield man's going back even deeper and making passes from sometimes in between positions and it's because of this playing out from the back. It's opened the team up so much that it's foot too far for midfield players to get in the box. And now I couldn't guarantee one midfield player that would get you 10 goals in that Premier League now.
Yeah. No, it's. I mean, who is your favourite player at the moment?
That's a good one. I like the boy Mason Mount at Derby, only because he's developing but I like him.
Is there anyone in the Sunderland team at the minute you like?
I like Gooch. Is it what's
winger.
I like him. I think he looks as if he might be a player, and Holliman. Yes. Yeah, I think he can play, and I think they're a nice combination, really. But the manager's got a good reputation. I mean, he was a name that caught everybody by surprise. But when you check up his pedigree of what he's done and won the Manager of the Year in Scotland last year, he's got the right pedigree, and I think it's easier to come in and build from the division they're in, that rather than trying to build when you're struggling at the bottom of the top league.
Any final questions, Nick, Neil, before we sign off?
As a player, didn't you win the league?
I was in Clough's first side that won the league.
Yeah,
yes.
at Derby County.
Yes.
Yeah. So I was just wondering what that was like. I mean, for the younger listeners, that would be like the Premiership these days. So it's effectively you won.
Well, when Clough came from Hartlepool down to take over Derby County, I think he had a look at me and he wasn't quite sure. So he bought Carlin, Arthur Stewart, Toddy. He bought about 4 or 5 players to replace me. But I kept sneaking back in. And, I happened to be there. I mean, I hadn't won the thing in 100 years, and then you happened to be in the side the year that they win it.
Yeah.
And, of course, as you probably know, we won it on the Friday night against Liverpool 1-0.
Yeah.
And Liverpool and Leeds could have overtaken us if they'd won their last match.
Yeah.
And neither did. And we were in Mallorca at the time on holiday, because that was Clough loved getting away at the end of the season. As soon as the last game was finished, we were on the first flight to Mallorca. Same place every year. And people used to come back and book the same weeks because they knew we'd be there and have a bit of fun. And that was a terrific achievement by him. I mean, when you think that he, with a side, I'm not saying like Derby, but a town like Derby, and then to go to Forest and win 2 European Cups. Mm-hmm. And he had a system that you only went down one side. He had identical wingers in. He had Hinton at Derby and he had Robertson at Forest, and nobody on the right-hand side, wide. And what he did, he just ploughed the ball down the left-hand side all the time. And then on the right-hand side where I played, and Martin and Neil played for Notts Forest, we were to get in at that back post at every opportunity, but never played really. We played with a right winger. And it was a horrible place to play, because every time the left back got it, you went to close him, and when you got 10 yards away, he'd play it past you. So you were actually doing doggies. And Martin complained about it many times. Martin said he didn't want to play there because it was much easier in the central midfield than playing on that right-hand side. But it is now sides are so open and sides are so vulnerable to counter-attacks that I think, he obviously had something that, I don't think anybody's really tried to copy since.
Okay. I would like to thank you, Alan, for coming on. It's been a pleasure. And when's your book on sale? Is it on sale now?
Yes, it is. It's out, yes. And as I say, I haven't written it. It's all about those 3 years, 81 to 84.
Cool. And Nick, Neil, pleasure to have you on.
Thanks very much.
And,
thanks for inviting.
Yeah, thanks for guiding me over a time period which I wasn't 100% confident on.
Did you research that?
Yeah, I did a little bit. I mean, I made a few mistakes, but do you know what? It happens. That's life. So thanks everyone for coming on. Thanks for listening, and